Okay. So first, some framing and then two arguments. So onto the framing. First of all, I'd like to note that like currently the vegan movement is extremely focused on just being animal free. Like this is 100% of its advocacy. It's literally in the name, and they've been doing this for like decades, saying that oh, the only option is to stop eating meat entirely or like eat like less meat, basically. But the end goal is just like not eat meat at all and be animal free. So on our side, I think the movement will talk about like both things. It'll probably slowly pivot towards like animal offsetting more, but like movements won't just like pivot overnight, right? They're gonna like slowly pivot and integrate this more and pivot away from like only being animal free. So it'll obviously talk about both because first of all, people just associate the vegan movement always with just like eating less, but also people know that like the optimal amount is just eating no meat at all because if you don't eat any meat, then like your offset is obviously zero. So we're gonna have both messaging, both pieces of messaging inside the movement, that like it's good to not eat meat at all, but also if you do eat meat, then you're gonna offset it. And how this offsetting is likely to work is that like they can donate based on um like it's really hard to evaluate, but we're probably gonna try to like set general guidelines. Like if you kill like an animal a week, you should probably make a weekly donation to like a charity that makes animal welfare better in like a factory farm or a charity that's dedicated to like preserving endangered animals or something like that. And we think people will donate based on like how much guilt they feel or how much they can afford, simply because it's hard to like evaluate exactly how much pain and like harm you're causing. So first argument why this gets more buy-in. First of all, lots of people are unwilling to completely give up meat or like even give up meat like slightly. This is because first of all, it's a large part of their diet. They're really used to it and they like it a lot. Like for example, people's like favorite foods, which they've eaten their entire lives, might be like lobster or like fish or steak or like chicken, right? And they just don't want to give this up because it brings them so much happiness. And it's just like a staple of their life. They're sort of like addicted to it. Also, there's like lots of cultural norms about food and like traditions as well. So if it's like Thanksgiving, you might want to eat like a turkey, or if somebody really likes eating McDonald's and they just like really want like that Big Mac, uh, then like they might do it. Or if on someone's like birthday, they always like eating chicken, they're gonna do that. But most importantly, it's because of like convenience and also accessibility. So first of all, lots of products just are made of meat in some way. It's completely like almost impossible to avoid products that don't have any meat in them, especially since like in the status quo, like it's just not that accessible, vegan products, I mean. But also you need like enough food to get nutrients. And in a ton of areas, especially low income areas, it's really hard to access like vegan options because they're like more expensive. They're like more expensive because like less people care about veganism inside that area. But also it's just like really hard to find the amount that you need to actually fulfill all of your nutrient needs within that area. So it's impossible basically for a ton of people to go vegan or eat less meat. However, these people are willing to donate. For like, first of all, like giving up money is just much more convenient and easier because it's not uncomfortable compared to like giving up your favorite food. It's much more accessible. And if you're poor, you can just give up less. But also, I think people will donate exactly as much as they feel guilt for. Because if they eat like a lot of meat, and they care about it a lot, they're gonna donate a lot. If they eat like a lot of meat, but they care about it less, they're gonna donate less. We think this is great because it's very, very efficient. You're basically extracting the maximum amount of value from them, like the maximum amount of money that they're willing to give up, like for the movement. And this is only applying to the people who like aren't willing to completely give up meat. The second thing to talk about is that, like, on our side, people who are willing to give up meat will still give it up on both sides. This is because, like, first of all, we're gonna continue like both messaging, but also lots of people have already like given up meat because the vegan movement has been going on for like a long time. They're not gonna just like pivot and think it's an acceptable option to like, oh, start eating meat again and then like give money up because they think it's something that's like fundamentally immoral, right? But also, as people get more into the movement, they're gonna like slowly give it up. So maybe someone eats less meat now, because it's just less convenient for them to like give a bit of money every time they eat meat. And then they get more integrated into the movement, they meet more people, and then they eventually give up eating meat entirely. So this offers them like a pipeline to tone down the amount of meat that they eat, while also donating money to the movement. And here's why like that these charities are actually very important because like charities need a lot of money and lots of these charities don't get enough money to do a very important stuff such as like helping better conditions within factory farms, which affects like a ton of animals, or like preserving endangered animal species, which like helps the entire ecosystem become like a better place. Or if you donate to like the vegan movement, which a lot of the funds are probably going to, they can actually solve the root cause of the issue, which is making like vegan products more accessible, especially in like areas that are like lower income, or making investing into products that like mimic meat, such as like Beyond Meat burgers that actually make meat more accessible for people who really enjoy the taste of meat. Okay, second argument, why we get less alienation and backlash. So when the vegan movement says to a lot of people, your only option is to stop eating meat, and they can't stop eating meat because of like the tradition, or because like of where they live and accessibility, they get really mad. And this is reasonable because like they just feel alienated from the movement. They get angry that like they think the movement is completely unreasonable and crazy because like they simply don't have a choice to eat meat or not. It's something that like they that like is so important to them that they just can't comprehend the movement taking it away. So they shut out the movement because they don't want like the cognitive dissonance of guilt and like the movement saying that they're evil, right? So this generates a ton of like bad publicity for vegans. Like look at like how online right now vegans are painted as people who are crazy, who are like overbearing, and who are just like virtue signaling everywhere because a ton of people, especially people who like just don't want to give up meat, uh, will just like think vegans are crazy. On our side, they'll see it as more reasonable because now they can actually opt into the movement and feel better about themselves while also helping the movement. We think this will like cause a lot less alienation from the movement. Proud to propose.
I thank the speaker for those remarks. A reminder to offer and accept points of information. I now invite the Leader of Opposition.
Am I audible?
Yep, you're good.
Great. Just give me like 5 more seconds to set up my papers. Okay. Okay, so my speech will start in three, two, one. Two arguments from opening opposition. First, why this waters down the message of the vegan movement and how it's harmful for the solidarity of the movement. But secondly, even if we take the best case from government side, why this will even in a case where they increase buy-in and make some sort of change, why that change is not going to be as significant as they try to talk about, and why it's actually something counterproductive at the end of the day. Before that, just one piece of rebuttal. I think that the main claim coming from the first argument from the previous speaker about like how more people can now pivot towards veganism and join the movement once they start, start like paying money, but then like initially being exposed to more vegan people and then slowly changing their mindset. I think this is very unlikely to be the case in the first place. Because I just want to point out at the top of my speech at this point that the people who are likely to going to opt into such like uh such animal offsetting are probably not like individuals on the ground in like rural areas, for example, as they talk about. I think the likely character that is doing this is probably big corporations that are afraid of being canceled or being called out by these vegan movements, or for example, just want to have a more better image of being a more like, animal friendly corporation and blah blah blah. I think these are the organizations and actors that do have the capacity because they have lots of sums of money in the first place, but also have the incentives to do this compared to people who live in rural areas who aren't touched aren't in touch with veganism and don't really have, the incentive to, suddenly change their mindset and become a more vegan person to begin with. Therefore, I think that what this means is that this slowly pivot towards veganism is unlikely to happen because the core incentives of these people to give up their money to do animal offsetting is not to actually become vegan in the first place or to actually, slowly pivot towards veganism, but just to use this animal offsetting as a means to get away from being called out that they're not animal friendly. And therefore, I think this the change that they try to talk about is fundamentally not going to happen. Given that, moving on to the first argument, why does this water down the message and how it's harmful for the solidarity of the movement? First, why is this likely going to water down the message of the movement? I think this is very easy to argue simply because of analysis
You know
that
why?
has gave to us. I'll take you around 5 minutes. What the previous speaker has talked about was that people who are already gone vegan are likely not going to go back because they already think that consuming meat or animal products is something fundamentally immoral. That is exactly the reason why when you have people that are joining your movement that still consume animal products at the end of the day, that literally causes that cognitive dissonance within the movement. You're literally allowing people that still consume these immoral products in your movement. And I think this is something that very harmful, like goes against the core fundamentals of these people's beliefs, and is something that can cause a lot of, threat to these people's mindsets, right? And I think this is very important. I think this is very simple to argue. But what are the impacts of this watering down of the messaging?
POI?
I think that what we mean by watering down of the messaging is because there's going to be like different groups of people within the same movement that believe in different things. One, it's going to lead to things like fracturing of the movement or like less coordination within the movement, like worse communication within the movement because there's different groups of people existing within the movement that have different beliefs and they're unlikely to want to cooperate with each other simply because they think that the actions of another person is fundamentally immoral. What this means is that more people within the movement are going to lose hope
On that
towards
point,
they're going to have, and what this leads to is things like less show ups to protest, or even like less, actions to try to strive for more legislation that supports vegan lifestyles, for example, like lowering the prices of vegan foods at the end of the day. So I think what the first impact at the end of the day is that there's going to be less legislative change simply because of the less coordination happening within the movement. And I just want to make one extremely important piece of framing here, and that is to say that the vegan movement currently is a very new movement compared to, for example, large scale social movements that exist in the current world, like the feminism movement or the LGBTQ movement that have existed for decades. And I think that they have a fundamental they have a small movement base at small movement base to begin with, right? What this means is that even if they have these kinds of more money like side governments trying to talk about, if they don't have the solidarity to actually coordinate these protests
on
or
that point,
coordinate actions to strive for change, I think nothing is going to fundamentally happen. So I think sort of solidarity or coordination is something that we should prioritize more than money, like side government is trying to talk about. But secondly, I want to talk about the catharsis aspect of this motion. I think like a lot of people that join these vegan lifestyles, as side government concedes, believe that consuming animal products is something immoral and that's something that we should not do that. And I think that providing these kind of safe space for these individuals to, have people to like interact with people that still believe in the same beliefs and have hope in the movement is something that provides a lot of mental catharsis to these individuals. But once we actually water down the movement and allow people that do that fundamentally
POI.
against these people's beliefs inside the movement, I think that's the moment when these people feel more mental harm and also severely harms these vulnerable individuals. I'll take your POI.
Just because someone donates money to an animal cruelty charity does not mean they join the vegan movement.
Yes, but I think that the whole point of that is still like you're still literally watering down the movement, right? Because, it's still literally sending out the notion that it's okay to still consume animal products, even if you at the moment that spend a lot of money for the movement to begin with, right? So what is the counterfactual world? I think that, even on our side of the house, we can still like improve the messaging or the style of the messaging that the vegan movement puts out. What this means is that we can still like decrease the amount of shaming or like cancel culture that the vegan movement puts out and like encourage mess and increase the amount of encouraging messaging, or for example sharing more like small steps that people can take like before they completely go vegan, for example, those kind of things. And these grassroots movements I think can slowly increase the amount of people that support vegan movements at the end of the day. And I think that even if we're still going to allow people that still consume meat to donate for charity on our side of the house, I think there's a fundamentally different thing and valuing them as something as a as forgiving them for their actions or not. And I think that, that is something that is mutually exclusive, also replying to that POI. At the end of the day, I think the comparison is very simple. Instead of increasing the quantity of money that these movements happen, I think increasing the quality of the movement and this coordination and the solidarity is more important for this movement at its initial stage. Moving on to this, briefly moving on to the second argument, even in the best case where we increase the buy-in, I think that the change that they can gain is very minimal for mainly two reasons. And that's simply, and the main reason is because the threshold to allow animal offering is not going to be very high. What this means is that first, uh, so what we mean here is that I think just as I mentioned, because the main actors that are going to donate such money to these to these charities are going to be like large companies, I think that they're still going to be harming the environment. They're still going to do massive animal killing to produce meat products. And even in the best case where lots of money goes to these vegan organizations, I think not much change is going to happen simply because these large actors are still going to cause a lot of harm to animals at the end of the day. For all these reasons, very proud to oppose.
I thank the speaker Invite the DLO when you're ready.
Yeah, I'm audible.
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, thank you. So, start my speech. I take POI from around 5 or 6 minutes. So start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So firstly, I want to start with the characterization of what this message looks like, because the opening comments I'm trying to say like, oh, this choice is quite accessible, or etc. Firstly, I want to clarify that. The first, I think anyway, for the low income family or the poor people, this choice is not accessible in the first place. It's because like if you need to eat the meat every day or the many times, and you need to pay the money every time, every moment you eat meat, these kind of financial burden is quite huge here in the first place. So that I think anyway, these kind of thing is not accessible to these types of the people. But two, I think so that I think the people who can making the changes, making any types of the donation or action in the gap like paradigm uniquely, the people who have relatively have capacity in the first place. But I think these kind of people, it's anyway have choices to like donate their money to this kind of movement if they have an incentive to support, these kind of movement in the first place. Anyway, even this doesn't matter whether you need a morally capable or not in the first place. So that I think in general, these kinds of the people, individual people who want to support this movement, and it doesn't anyway change it. So what is a crucial delta here? The first thing that I want to clarify as a delta here is that I think the individual who now support the animal movement and who now don't eat meat is changes into the choices of the government like movement, meaning like they are start to eat meat, and then they are like start to pay money. Why this is likely is because like some people were feeling like they shouldn't eat meat, but the people in not like it, there's a limited number of people who doesn't any types of experience of the eating meat. What I mean by this is that every people know about the taste of the meat, and they know about like meat is tasty. So that if these movement will like provide an alternative choices that allow the people to eat meat, I think there's many people like suddenly going to these kind of choices. So I think in general, as a purpose of the animal movement, they are likely their purpose is like saving the more numbers of animal, cut the amount of the animals meat consumption. I think these goals likely to be decreased on their side of the house, and this actual buying food. And the number of the people or amount of the consumption of the meat is actually increasing in the gap per them in the first place. But second important delta here is that
POI.
the big corporation or etc. No. I think the government side trying to prove that in the government paradigm, the more factory is going to the better, better and friendly for the animals. But I think I want to flip that. The first thing I want to note that is that anyway, the corporation have the incentive to improve the welfare of the animal in the factory in the first place. It looks like the pressure from the animal movement, but also that in the current situation, the investor or like these actually will focusing on the ESG investment or those circumstances of the animal in the first place. Meaning like anyway, these kinds of the corporates have an incentive if they have a capacity, incentive to change its or factory or situation in the first place. But the thing is, they have no capacity in the first place. What is happening in the government paradigm? In the government paradigm, these kind of movement, they pressurize the corporation to paying the money in the first place. I think if they were allowed to pay the money and they will use the money capital for like justifying their own meat consumption, their bad environment, their bad situation condition of the animal, they were unlikely to changing more in the first place. So I think in terms of the animal welfare within the corporation, I think this is far worse in the GAP paradigm. But secondly, let's say uniquely in the GAP paradigm, they can change it. I think this delta is quite minimal. Insofar as I think these as my partner clearly explaining, and these kind of animal movement is an initial stage of the movement. What I mean by this is that they have not so huge capacity in the first place. So I think for these kind of movement, this is quite difficult to justify the amount of the consumption amount of the compensation toward their own like harm caused by these corporations in the first place. So what I mean by this is that if the corporation is pressurize the animal movement to saying like, oh, you're like amount of the compensation which the animal movement like well provided or trying to justify is not so rational. It's quite future, and if they say so, they cannot prove that, just prove their justification, and then easily these kind of the compensation or easily this kind of the money is likely to be decreased on the government paradigm. What I mean by this is that anyway, this kind of the amount of the money of which corporation will pay as a charity is quite minimal in the first place, but also as an incentive of the as an incentive about the animal movement. There are many types of animal movement within the world in the first place. And let's say like this animal movement want the charity from this organization or this actor. I think these people saying like, oh, we will allow you if even though you will never pay so huge amount of money as the other movement were trying to like require you to. So that I think in general, as of these kind of race to the bottom mechanism, I think these corporations are likely to pay the less amount of the money anywhere in the God paradigm. So that I think in general, these kind of factor, like these kind of movement, we never cannot get any types of money, cannot providing this so huge amount of money to the groups which trying to changing their structure. So that I think these kind of structural changes is quite minimal in the God paradigm. Let's take from closing now.
Yeah, so you say that they're going to give money directly to these groups who are going to be pressuring and lobbying to end animal cruelty. On your side, these groups get no money whatsoever and get no power.
So as I told you, these kind of some corporations have the incentive to doing so, but these corporations can justify to not changing their structure. I think these kind of I think because of this movement is still in the initial stages, I think these kind of gradual and small changes are quite important. In your side of the house, you cannot suddenly change it, but these kind of changes which have a possibility to changing their structure uniquely on our paradigm is losing the possibility, and there are no changes in your paradigm. We still have some space over the changes in the first place. But secondly, I want to clarify. Then going to second claim I want to pose here is that I think the Prime Minister in the final part of the speech, they say like images the reputation of the animal movement. But I think this kind of thing is quite minimal and is quite uncomparative. Insofar as anyway, these kind of radical movement, radical people who are trying to doing radical action is anyway existing. And insofar as SNS or media is only focusing on these kind of radical people, sensational people, I think anyway these kinds of people because of this existence of radical action, anyway the image of this movement anyway going down. I think this kind of comparative never existing at all. So I think the crucial data here is only the buying, but also my partner clearly proved that why in our partner we have a more buying. The first is that these kinds of people within the movement, there is some level of difference of the commitment in the government paradigm and the fraction is actually be happening in the first place, which directly going to the less motivation for the core fund, insofar as for the core like people who fully committed to the movement, feeling like this kind of movement is uncomfortable, is never like matches with your purpose or never matches your commitment. So that I think this kind of movement loses support in the first place. I think the number of the people who support this movement is quite important. Insofar, in order to start the demonstration, in order to start something in the posting advertisement in the SNS, you need a human resources in the first place. So that I think this kind of commitment is important. But also insofar, in order to successfully prove their own successability, you need a emotion, you need like the money or etc. In order to do so, you need a core fundam basis. So that I think uniquely this kind of thing accessible in our paradigm prior to oppose.
Thank the speaker for those remarks, and all speakers for a good top half. I now invite the Yeah, you are.
Okay, thank you. Starting in a few seconds. Also, PIs in the chat, don't do them verbally, please. Three, two, one. Simple case from CEO. We say that evoking emotions, strong emotions in people is the strongest tool that vegan movement can use. And we will explain to you why otherwise, like if they promote this animal offsetting, people will actually not have this emotional reaction and thus not have the benefits of buying the vegan message. So why it's important to evoke strong emotions in people when it comes from vegan movement. We say three things here. First, it's extremely inconvenient to be vegan. Like government already explained this, but we completely agree. Like especially in the beginning, it's a enormous change. Like it's sometimes difficult. You didn't used to preparing food that is vegan, buying it out, etc. Second, you're pressured from your surroundings. You have old habits that you're used to eating a certain way. Your parents are telling you, "Oh, when you will stop with this nonsense and just eat like a normal person, etc." So, this is the strong pressure when you try to be vegan. But third of all, like unlike any other movement, for example, if I'm trying to sell someone feminist movement, like I can say, okay, here are benefits for you. But when it comes to vegan movement, it's usually you're mostly doing it for someone else, for the animals, and not only for you. You will not have these strong benefits. So we say that in order for you to even buy partially this message, you need to have strong emotional reaction for any meaningful change with people, and you can't allow people to have easy excuse to dismiss you, but rather be united and not hypocritical, because vegan movement can say, okay, this is murder, this is terrible, these animals are suffering tremendously, but here is the price and you can pay $200 and then we are excusing you for your murder. That is actually really hypocritical and people are just not gonna believe it. If you're telling someone that it's murder, that it's terrible, like how are you putting a price tag on it? We are not for that. But we say that promotion of animal offsetting makes movement look shady, corrupt, and insincere. Why? First of all, we say that majority of people are suspicious to charities in general. Every country had some big scandal with charities before with corruption. Also, there was a similar idea about animal offsetting was with carbon offsetting just for ecology purposes that was popular a few years ago. They turned out to be some McKinsey scheme. So people are skeptical of this. Also, impact that you can achieve with these charities is really abstract. Maybe it will help something, maybe it won't. So people are generally suspicious. But secondly, we see that people are, in most of the cases, conditioned to dismiss vegan movement and its messaging overall, because you feel like their messaging is personal attack on you because you are a killer. Also, it completely goes against what you have been doing your whole life. Vegans usually you perceive them as they are presenting to be better than you, even if they are not doing that. You see them and you judge them because you think they believe they are morally superior than you, and you despise them for that. Also, you subconsciously probably know that they have a point. So you have this strong inner conflict. You love animals. You couldn't kill them yourself, but at the same time, you try to detach animal products from the animal that you see on the street or somewhere else. So when they shove it to your face, like to tell you this is murder, this is who are you making suffer, etc., they are not living any beautiful life and eating grass as you are imagining. You are conditioned to just dismiss that because the thought of that being true is so horrible for you. But now, when you have this excuse to believe they are corrupt, basically to see that they are promoting this animal offsetting, putting the price on the suffering of animals that they claim to care about. This is your tipping point where you can make excuse, okay, they are full of shit. Basically, even they are saying they care about animals, like they obviously don't. They only want the money. They're hypocritical and so on. So it's you're already conditioned to dismiss them, and now like you have a green light to actually do that, and it's perfect excuse to not feel guilt, to not believe them. And in most cases, please notice that this is irreversible, meaning that for people that see something as corrupt, as hypocritical, as terrible, it's really hard for them to come back and revisit the messaging in the future. We say that impacts of this negative image on vegan movements are enormous. First, people are not buying messaging, but unlike a government that is explaining being vegan or not being vegan are two options, there is the whole scale in between, meaning that now vegan movement is promoting these gradual changes as Nova Castio in POI. Basically, you have these gradual changes where, okay, just don't eat meat for one meal or something like that. Also, there is promotion of a lot of issues not related to food and eating habits. Like, don't buy fur coats. That is not something that is really hard to do. Like, you can just not buy fur coats, buy the alternative. You cannot support, you can not support brands and cosmetics that is tested on animals. You can not buy a pet, you can just adopt them. These are all the stuff that you can do if you buy into this messaging, and that you are now more likely to dismiss as the impact of them being perceived as corrupt. And also legislative change that they're talking about are much harder because people don't believe that vegan movements are sincere in these instances. But finally, why it is important for people to actually buy the messaging of vegan movement? 4 reasons here. First, we say this is enormous animal suffering. How much ever we want to gaslight ourselves, how this is not so terrible, it's even worse than we think. These animals are born, raised, and killed in cages, and we are actually paying money for people to do that to them. It's destroying our planet with all terrible gases, destroying like a landfill. Also, it's terrible for health. It's leading to obesity, cardiovascular diseases, antibiotic resistance, and all other stuff. And also, it's spending enormous amount of money for the subsidies that are really not necessary. Please, CEO.
Thanks. I now invite the government whip.
Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, you can.
Oh, lovely. Okay, let me just get my timer set up here. Three, two, one. Okay, I'm just going to briefly rebuild my partner's case and then go through each team in the debate and tell you why we won. Okay, so firstly, on rebuilding, I actually had no engagement whatsoever from CO with our case there, but I'm going to just reiterate to you what we told you. So first of all, we are just getting more money to these charities, and therefore we are getting more direct harm reduction. What does this look like? I mean, firstly, it looks like these charities be able to do more advertising, okay, which means more understanding of the vegan movement and more of those important emotions evoked that we heard from CO about emotions of disgust and things like this that actually get you bought into the vegan movement in the first place. But secondly, there's the powerful lobbying that these groups can do, okay? And these lobbying can hit all the different sectors that are involved with veganism, okay? So firstly, like supermarkets, they can be lobbying supermarkets to have more affordable and different choices of vegan products on the shelves. You can be lobbying the government, which would be introducing more regulations, like specifically on how you can actually treat animals, what like instruments you're allowed to use to prod animals, how many animals you're allowed to have in a certain confined space, things that directly impact the welfare of animals that the government can actually legislate for, because they just see this now as something that they can, earn votes on with the public. And then thirdly, also you can directly lobby the like agri-food sector, okay, in terms of enforcement of the laws that are already on the books, and things like this. And then secondly, you're getting less backlash from the agri sector, from farmers, because now you are not directly threatening their livelihood. As it stands, the vegan movement and livestock farmers cannot coexist because the vegan movement is saying we want nobody to eat meat. We do not want animals to be farmed and killed for meat. Now, all of a sudden, it's possible for them to coexist because instead the vegan movement is saying we are focused on harm reduction. We are focused on no unnecessary cruelty being made to animals. So now all of a sudden, farmers are going to be a lot more willing to cooperate with the movement. And then thirdly, there's just going to be more sticking with basically your involvement in the vegan movement or your involvement with these charities in the first place because the change is actually visible and you feel like something is happening. Unlike when you just give up meat and you go, okay, well, nothing feels like it changed. Okay, so let's go through the teams in the debate. So firstly, OG, but yeah, I'll take OO to start with, yeah.
The people that make such social change on your side are the people at the top of the movement, the leaders that deeply care about their cause. If you water down the message and such leaders feel like they're doing something morally wrong and feel guilty, wouldn't it be harder for such leaders to actually strive for all the change they just talk about because they lose motivation?
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna get on when I get on to OO, I'm gonna get on to your point about watering down the message. But firstly, just on OG. Okay, so OG tell you about kind of more buy-in, which is true, but they don't necessarily give you that direct impact which we get. Okay, they do tell you that there is more buy-in, and they give you some good mechs on that. We give you more unique mechs on that, but more importantly, we bring you to the direct impact, which is harm reduction on the side of the animals and less backlash and resistance from farmers, whereas they are mainly just focused on the reduction of meat consumption. Okay, so like I think just on weighing over OG, kind of firstly on likelihood. I think it's just tougher to reach their impacts because they're so focused on the giving up of the meat and they don't necessarily directly tell us why from giving up meat you then get the change you want of animals being hurt less. Whereas we tell you very clearly more money for these groups that can do their job better and have more power, which means direct change in government, supermarkets, agriculture. Secondly, then, like I think it's just like it's important that we show how we reduce harm to a greater extent because again we have missing steps here in the reduction of meat eating coming to the impact of animal welfare or whatever it may be. They also do tell you about backlash, but again, they're more focused on the backlash from the individual perspective. Our point on backlash is more clear how it impacts because we're talking about the people who are actually in charge of how the animals get treated, the farmers. Okay, on to OO. All right, so just to respond to this POI and generally on the point of watering down the message of the movement. First of all, from the POI I gave, they already concede that just donating money does not mean you join the vegan movement. You don't all of a sudden like start showing up to meetings because you've donated money at a supermarket one time. Okay, you actually have no direct influence on the movement. It is just your money that the movement is taking. The people who are actually involved, the people who actually like make change, who actually show up to meetings, show up to protests, those are obviously the people who are actually care, who are orthodox vegans, so to speak, who do not eat meat. Okay, so these people that we're talking about who like on status quo just aren't interacting at all and who are now instead like throwing some money in because they feel bad, like they're not actually interacting with this whatsoever. So that means that OO can't reach their impacts about like less coordination, less people protesting, less change. Okay, I think then also what we get from OO is stuff about like, well, large corporations are still going to do bad stuff even if you're lobbying them. Like this is symmetrical. No matter what, large corporations, agri corporations are doing these bad things to animals. At least on our side, there's now way more pressure on them to stop doing those things because these groups are now empowered and have money and can change stuff. Okay, thirdly then, like they're talking about more people like not going vegan because of this. I think it's clear that like, even though it's not the focus of our case, like if these vegan charities have more money, they can put out more shocking ads to convince people to become vegan. They can lobby supermarkets to have more vegan, cheaper vegan options so it's easier for people to become vegan. Okay, so I think even on that clash of the debate on more people going vegan or not, we win there as well. So just on weighing, they are concerned about watering down the message. Even if that is true, there's to some extent some watering down of the intenseness of the message of the vegan movement. First, I think this is actually handy for getting more buy-in because people don't feel like it's an extremist movement. But secondly, we find it is much more important to have direct harm reduction on the side of the animal. That is what matters here to the vegan movement. Less animals dying unnecessarily, less animals being abused. Okay? And then on large corporations doing stuff and donations helping corporations justify stuff. Either way this stuff is happening, either way these agri corporations are doing those things, at least on our side we get money and power for the groups that actually will be able to act and pressure them. Finally then on CO, first they told us about evoking emotions being really important. I think this is symmetrical. I think even on our side we're able to evoke these emotions even better because we're giving money to charities and groups that can create these ads that evoke these strong emotions and stop people from eating meat. But then secondly, on the movement looking shady, corrupt, and insincere, I think at the end of the day, we're still getting money from them and you aren't, okay? We are getting money. We are the ones giving money to these groups and being able to have them commit change. You also said that people subconsciously know that the vegan movement have a point. We make it so much easier for people to tap into the subconscious thing and silence that voice in their head because all they have to do is give money instead of put in all the effort of having to actually become vegan, okay? So I think we basically flip both of their points there. CG.
I thank the speaker for those remarks. I now invite the opposition whip.
Hi, just to check if you can hear me.
Yep, all good.
Just a moment to set up my stopwatch. Okay, first, the answers they have in the last 35 seconds to our case. One, they tell you, okay, we're it's okay to be shady as long as you get their money. But notice the burden that none of the governments have fulfilled is that you will be seen as trustworthy. People do not give money to things that they see are shady because they like their money and they don't want it to be stolen. This is the point of our case. On the emotions, they say, okay, emotions on either side. But no, in order for you to act upon your emotions, to make this change, you need to believe in this movement. You need to have faith. Look, the one thing that we have, because it's a high barrier to be vegan or to volunteer in vegan organizations or do all sorts of, the one thing, or even to donate, the one thing we have is we get people's trust. We need them to feel like we are honestly doing this for the animals, for the welfare, and so on. We cannot be seen as hypocrites. So I think Katarina quite clearly explains to you why you will be seen as a scam by the majority of people, and so on. I'm gonna add even more stuff to that. Look at the things they talk about. Oh, we're gonna lobby. Look, notice that a lot of people, most people, have a very shady view of lobbying. It has very negative connotations, and you don't feel good with funding it, even when it's something that you might support. You see it as background deals and all of those things. But secondly, POI in the chat. Secondly, notice that it takes even if some people trust us and probably some will, usually it takes one scandal. We can have hundreds of people working in these different organizations, and then there will be one scandal, some a head of the organization getting a lot of money as payment, and it crashes, it spills over, and it makes everything seem untrustworthy. This has happened to so many charities. It keeps happening. It's one of the reasons why people don't donate to charity. They're far more easily to give money directly to the person in need or to make a lifestyle change than actually donating to this abstract thing. Okay, now I want to address both governments at the same time. They try to point out that this will be an easy change and so on, multiple responses to why you have very heavy barriers. The most important barrier is that you won't have trust. Katarina proves this. I even add more to it. And without trust, people are not going to give their hard-earned money to it. But I'm going to add even more. Two, it's really not that easy. Notice what government says. You're going to need to calculate how many animals you've killed. Okay, I ate this much chicken, then into the calculator, so on. Oh, this month, it's $78 or whatever, $140. Two, notice that they're still you're asking them to give away a large or at least some amount of money. Opening government tells you, oh, eating vegan is expensive, but notice what is probably a lot more expensive: only paying for the meat and then paying for the offset. This is probably a much larger amount of money, and you perceive it because you're paying it in one bunch every month. So that's another big barrier. Third barrier, it's very abstract. What change are you? We're fighting for some change and maybe we'll be effective, maybe not. This way people know I have not eaten chicken today. A chicken is alive. I can feel good about myself. This is a fantastic thing. Thank you. Let's see what else. Like I want to address like closing. And closing tells you farmers. This is like very symmetric. Notice that like at best they have like farmers a bit less motivated, but notice the sort of change that they want to fight for. They want to fight for lobbying change that will probably restrict farmers, cut down food subsidies, which again is attacking like farmers' livelihoods. There is no change in the way farmers perceive you. Okay, moving to opening government. Opening government tells you there's going to be less backlash from people and so on. They're going to have a more positive view. 3 reasons why this is not true. Like first, people's perception of the vegan movement is already made. Like a lot of people are against it and they already have their preconditioned biases and all of these things. So they're probably going to keep them. They're not going to change their mind because they say, oh, now they're okay with offsets. I guess they're okay, the vegans. Second, notice that like opening government says is in your messaging, you're still going to have the point that meat is murder, meaning that you can, it's not that people are going to hate that message and then they're going to see, but okay, they're good with offsets, so we don't mind. So as long as you still have that message to people that they are murderers, the people that are against you are going to be against you either way. Thirdly, like notice that the media, like especially right-wing media, is still gonna scandalize you, still gonna point out like all the things, still gonna like really demonize the vegan movement either way. Meaning, I don't see that we change the mind of these people like through this. Really, this has very minimal, if like not change. But even if you buy from the government, even if you buy that, oh, before I go on, OG, POI.
Yeah, we explain and CG repeats that you create more capacity for people to opt in by creating more initiatives like to make meat more accessible, like such as lobbying. And we also explain that we create a greater incentive in the long run through advertising campaigns. At best, Op-Bench only provides mitigatory responses.
Yeah, sure. I don't care if they're derivative, but notice like how you lose to us. Like the way is that the burden necessary is that people will donate. At the moment where we explain to you that people will perceive this as a scam, but also that there are significant barriers, this means you get very little donations. Sure, you get some, but in order to unlock your benefits, you need a significant amount of donation. And that's how we win over the government, because notice on our side, you have certainty. You have more people buying into the movement and not like dismissing it. This is like a major thing. And those people, every one of them that changes their lifestyle, like that becomes vegan, is like a win for us. We don't have this high bar of like legislative change beating the farmers lobby that is already so strong. We simply prove to you that by people changing the lifestyle, buying into this movement and not dismissing it, we get like change. Okay, let's move on and compare ourselves to our opening team. Now, the first reason why we go over them and like all of the teams in this debate is that we actually explain to you what is the impact of this. Why should people care about animals? This is something that has to be explained in a debate. It's not simply like intuitive, like more jobs or whatever. We dismiss animals like every day. So meaning that we prove to you what are the impacts of actually like changing people's opinions, like changing their behavior and all of these things. This is so important in like a vegan debate. Nobody else does it. The second way we win is through like certainty. Notice that the things that they are set out to prove is like there will be fracturing and legislative change. As a result, will be less likely and all of these things. We do not rely on the burden of proving legislative change. As long as like people, we don't like ruin the movement. More people are buying into this. People are not dismissing the movement because of this like very bad policy. We get the benefits on our side. So there is like also certainty on this. Meaning that when you compare ourselves to our opening team, it's quite clear that we go over them by proving completely, both proving our point, but both like really having a clear impact explained. Look, guys, I think we proved to you why treating animals like shit is really bad, and we also proved to you why this is like an awful policy.
Thanks, speaker, for those remarks. All speakers for a good round. Please leave. We will call you back soon. And also stop the recording, please.